The night I first saw him, the city felt quieter than usual, as if it had been holding its breath. I had been invited to a design conference downtown, a gathering I could barely afford to attend but couldn't afford to miss. I told myself it was for networking, but truthfully, I just wanted to feel like my life was moving somewhere. My days as a freelance designer had blurred into one another, too many deadlines, too few payments, and a constant whisper of failure echoing inside my chest. Noah had offered to come with me, but I told him not to bother. He had been working double shifts at the hospital, and lately, our time together felt like something we scheduled rather than shared. He'd been my anchor once, soft-spoken and dependable, but lately, his presence felt more like a mirror showing me what I was becoming, tired, distracted, and unsure that I arrived early, clutching my worn-out portfolio bag. The hall smelled of new paint and ambition, filled with sharp suits and easy laughter. That's when I noticed him, Liam Carter. He stood near the entrance, speaking to a small group of investors. He was older than most there, mid-30s perhaps, confident but understated, his tone smooth and deliberate. When he laughed, the room seemed to adjust to him, not the other way around that I hadn't realized I was staring until his eyes met mine. For a moment, I froze, caught between admiration and discomfort. Then, he smiled as if he already knew my name. Later, I would tell myself it was just politeness, but in that instant, something shifted that he approached me during one of the networking breaks. "Ethan Brooks, right? You did the design work for the Green and Lane campaign last spring." His memory startled me. That project had ended months ago. I said carefully. "Didn't think anyone noticed." He tilted his head slightly. "People notice more than they say." The way he said it made the air feel heavier. We talked for a few minutes, about design, deadlines, and the illusion of creative freedom. Liam spoke like someone who understood exhaustion but had found a way to make it look elegant. He told me he ran a small investment firm and sometimes took on creative projects for private clients. Before he left, he handed me his card. "I might have a proposal for you," he said. "Something that pays better than the usual struggle." I slipped the card into my pocket, trying not to seem too eager. When I returned home that night, Noah was asleep on the couch, his laptop still open, a medical journal glowing on the screen. The sight made me smile and ache at the same time. I covered him with a blanket and sat beside him for a while, staring at his calm face. There was a time when I would have woken him just to talk, but now I didn't want to disturb the peace. Over the next few days, I tried to push the encounter out of my mind, but curiosity crept back. I looked up Liam's firm online. It was legitimate, successful, even reputable. The following week, an email arrived from him. "Let's meet about the proposal. Coffee tomorrow?" When I arrived at the cafe, he was already there, wearing the same quiet confidence as before. We discussed the project, a private rebranding campaign for one of his companies. It sounded simple enough. Then he mentioned the pay, double my usual rate. I tried not to react, but my heart stuttered. "That's generous," I said. "I believe in rewarding talent," he replied. "And I believe in you." It wasn't the words, it was the way he said them. Not as flattery, but as certainty. His gaze lingered just a second too long, and I looked away, pretending to check my notes. He changed the topic smoothly, asking about my background, my goals. He listened in a way that felt intentional, not casual. Every answer I gave seemed to lead to another question, another chance for him to study me. When we finished, he stood and extended his hand. "You'll do great, Ethan. I'll have my assistant send over the details." Our handshake lasted a moment longer than it should have. That night, I told Noah I had landed a new client. He smiled, genuinely happy for me, and suggested we celebrate. I said I was too tired. The truth was, I didn't want to talk about Liam. Even saying his name would have made it feel more real. The following days moved quickly. I started working on the project, exchanging messages with Liam almost daily. What began as professional communication turned personal in subtle ways, comments about how late we both worked, shared jokes about impossible clients. Sometimes he'd text just to ask how my day was going. It was harmless, I told myself. One evening, he sent me a photo of his office view, city lights stretching beyond the glass. "This is where I think best," he wrote. You'd like it here. I hesitated before replying. Maybe one day. He responded with a single line, make that day soon. I reread those words several times, uncertain what they meant but unwilling to delete them. Noah noticed my distraction that night. Over dinner, he asked if I was okay. Just work, I said quickly. New client, tight schedule. He nodded but didn't push. That was the thing about Noah, he trusted me completely. And maybe that's what made the guilt start whispering that a week later, Liam asked to meet in person again, to review progress. His office was on the top floor of a downtown building, all glass and quiet luxury. He greeted me with a warmth that felt rehearsed yet sincere enough to disarm. As we reviewed the designs, he stood behind me, leaning slightly closer to see the screen. I could feel the faint trace of his cologne, something subtle, expensive. You have a gift, Ethan, he said softly. You see things differently. That's rare. I thanked him, keeping my focus on the computer, though my pulse quickened. He reached over to adjust the tablet, his hand brushing mine. It was nothing, accidental perhaps, but it stayed in my mind long after I left. By the time I returned home, the city had turned to dusk. I checked my bank account, his first payment had already arrived. The amount made me exhale sharply. I stared at the screen, then at the reflection of my face in the glass. I told myself it was just business, that I'd earned it, but as I turned off the lights and walked toward the bedroom, a thought surfaced quietly, one I didn't want to face. Some debts aren't paid in money, Noah murmured in his sleep as I slipped beside him, his hand brushing mine instinctively, like it always did. I closed my eyes, trying to match my breathing to his, pretending that everything was still the same. Yet deep down, I knew something had already shifted, something I couldn't undo. The following weeks unfolded quietly, as if the apartment itself held its breath. What had once felt like polite distance between Lucas and me began to soften into something warmer, something unspoken but persistent. The morning silences at the coffee maker turned into conversations that lingered too long. He'd ask about my day before it even began, and I found myself wanting to answer. We developed a rhythm that felt natural, too natural. He cooked dinner most nights, and I cleaned up afterward. Sometimes he'd stay in the kitchen with me, leaning against the counter, sleeves rolled up, voice low and unhurried. He'd tell small stories about his past, a childhood in Oregon, a brother he hadn't spoken to in years, a dream of one day owning a small cafe by the coast. His stories carried a melancholy that mirrored my own. One night, as I dried the last plate, I asked without thinking, "Do you ever get tired of being alone?" He smiled faintly, eyes focused on the dark window. "You stop noticing after a while," he said. Then, after a pause, "Until someone reminds you what company feels like." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. But something in his tone lingered, circling my thoughts long after I went to bed. Lucas had a way of filling the space between words with emotion. A brush of his hand, a glance across the room, each one carried more meaning than entire conversations. I told myself it was friendship, the kind of fragile connection two lonely people build to survive. But each day made the lie harder to maintain. It was late one evening when he mentioned Dylan. We were on the balcony, a bottle of red wine between us, the city lights flickering below. "I haven't been completely honest," he said, tracing the rim of his glass with a finger. The air grew still. "I'm still seeing someone. His name's Dylan. We've been together for years, but he travels a lot for work. Things have been complicated." I felt the ground shift under me. Complicated how? I asked, though part of me already knew that he sighed. "He's gone most of the time. When he's here, it feels like we're strangers sharing the same house. I guess I didn't realize how lonely I was until you moved in." I looked at him, heart thudding. His confession wasn't shocking, it only confirmed what I'd begun to suspect, but hearing it aloud made it real. It changed the way the air felt between us. "I'm not trying to make things messy," he added quickly, reading the hesitation on my face. "I just needed to tell you." The silence that followed was heavy and alive. I could hear the faint hum of traffic below, the whisper of wind against glass. I wanted to leave, to end the moment before it became something irreversible. But I stayed. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake listening to the faint sound of his footsteps in the hallway, the creak of floorboards, the closing of his door. My mind replayed his words again and again, each repetition threading guilt through the quiet longing I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I told myself to keep my distance. But distance is a fragile thing when you share walls and mornings. Days later, it was the heater that started it. My room's old radiator broke in the middle of an unusually cold night. I tried to fix it, but the metal hissed and rattled uselessly. Lucas knocked on my door, hair messy from sleep. "You'll freeze in here," he said. "Come stay in my room until it's fixed." I hesitated. "That's not necessary." "It's fine, Ethan," he said softly. "I'll take the couch if it makes you more comfortable." But when I stepped into his room, it was clear he hadn't meant it. The bed was wide enough for two, and the couch barely large enough for one. I told myself it was temporary, just one night that we lay there, a careful space between us, the glow from the streetlight cutting through the blinds. Neither of us spoke. I could hear his breathing, slow and steady, and my own heart, too loud in the quiet. Then, faintly, he whispered, "Do you ever wish things were simpler?" I turned my head. He was looking at me, eyes open in the dark. "Sometimes," I said. "But simple doesn't always mean right." He smiled sadly. "No. It doesn't." The space between us dissolved. His hand found mine under the blanket, hesitant at first, then sure. I didn't pull away. The touch felt inevitable, like gravity, slow, certain, unstoppable. When his lips met mine, the world shrank to the quiet pulse of breath and heartbeat. It wasn't rushed, not desperate, just two people stepping across a line they'd been pretending not to see. For a moment, everything felt right in the wrong way. Later, I lay awake, watching the faint light spill across his face. He looked peaceful, younger somehow. But guilt crept in, cold and certain. I had promised myself I wouldn't become part of someone else's betrayal, yet here I was, tracing the same painful outline. At dawn, I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. The apartment was hushed, the kind of stillness that follows after something irreversible. I made coffee, hands trembling slightly, and stared out the window as the sky turned pale. When Lucas entered the kitchen, he didn't speak. He just placed a hand on my shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of what we both already knew. His touch was warm, but it burned with consequence. That he finally said, "Dylan's coming back this weekend." I froze. The words landed heavy. "Does he know?" I asked. That he shook his head. "No. And I don't know what to do." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The coffee steamed between us, untouched. "I shouldn't have," I began, but he cut me off gently. "Don't," he said. "Last night was real. Even if it was wrong." I wanted to believe him, but the truth pressed hard against my chest. Real didn't make it right. The rest of the day passed like a half-remembered dream. I went through the motions, work, chores, quiet meals, but the air between us had changed. Every look, every word carried the weight of something forbidden. That night, as Lucas slept beside me again, I stared at the ceiling. I could feel the warmth of him, close enough to touch, close enough to destroy. That I told myself I could stop it here, that this would be the last night, the last secret. But as his hand brushed mine in sleep, the lie settled heavy and familiar in my chest. That I turned toward him, watching the faint rhythm of his breath. He looked calm, content. I envied that peace. That I whispered to the dark. I told myself it was love. The words barely left my lips before the truth followed, silent but undeniable. That it already felt like a secret. The next morning, Ethan woke with the uneasy residue of dreams that wouldn't quite dissolve. Daniel's words echoed in his mind, "Sometimes people only see what they're ready to understand." The sentence clung to him, weaving itself through every thought that day. He tried to paint, but the brush refused to move as freely as it used to. His art, once his escape, now mirrored his confusion. Over the following weeks, Daniel seemed more distant, often canceling plans with vague excuses. Yet when they did speak, he was tender, thoughtful, almost protective. Ethan wanted to believe it was just stress or fear, that love sometimes required patience. But a small, growing voice in his mind whispered otherwise. At home, Robert's behavior had shifted too. Claire mentioned during one of their phone calls that he'd been spending more time working late. She said it lightly, as though it were nothing unusual, but Ethan caught the trace of worry in her tone. He brushed it off, telling himself it was just parental instinct. Still, something about the overlap unsettled him: Daniel's sudden elusiveness, his father's absences, both circling the same unspoken mystery point. One evening, Daniel invited Ethan over to a rented apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't the first time Ethan had been there, but that night, something about the place felt different. A framed photo on the shelf caught his eye, a familiar park bench, the one near his parents' neighborhood. Daniel noticed his gaze. "You like that spot?" Daniel asked, his tone calm but watchful. "I grew up near there," Ethan replied. "It's strange. I've never seen anyone take that exact picture." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe we've crossed paths before and didn't know it." Ethan laughed softly, but his heart gave a small, uncertain flutter. Maybe. As the night went on, the conversation drifted from art to childhood. Daniel listened intently, his questions gentle but probing. When Ethan mentioned his father, his rigidity, his pride, Daniel's expression shifted for just a moment, as if something unspoken had struck him. "He sounds complicated," Daniel said quietly. "He is," Ethan replied. "But he tries. I just wish he'd see me, really see me." Daniel's eyes softened, though his voice trembled slightly. Sometimes people only understand what they're brave enough to face. The repetition of that phrase chilled Ethan. He tried to mask his reaction, nodding slowly, pretending it was just another coincidence. But the air between them thickened, as though truth hovered just beneath the surface. Later that night, when Daniel stepped into the kitchen to pour wine, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from his mother. "Dad's been acting strange lately. He keeps saying he needs time alone. Are you okay?" Ethan glanced toward the kitchen doorway. Daniel was humming softly, the low tune oddly familiar. His father used to hum the same melody on Sunday mornings. His chest tightened. It couldn't be. His mind raced to connect fragments that refused to align: the phrasing, the park photo, the tune. They were just coincidences, they had to be. But then, Daniel returned with 2 glasses of wine and said something that stopped Ethan cold. "You remind me of someone I used to know, someone who wanted the world to make sense before they could love themselves." It was a phrase his father had once told him when he came out at 18, word for word. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. The glass trembled in his hand. He forced a smile, pretending not to notice, not to understand. The rest of the evening passed in fragmented conversation, his mind caught between disbelief and dawning fear. When Daniel finally left for a meeting, Ethan sat in silence, surrounded by shadows. He couldn't sleep. At midnight, his curiosity overtook his restraint. He picked up Daniel's coat, which he had left draped over the couch, intending to hang it up, but as he lifted it, a wallet slipped from the inside pocket. He hesitated before picking it up. His conscience begged him to stop, to respect privacy. But his instincts screamed otherwise. Inside was a driver's license. The name was what shattered everything: Robert Cole. Ethan's breath caught violently. His body went rigid, a tremor crawling down his spine. He blinked, hoping he'd read it wrong, but the letters stayed fixed, undeniable. The photo showed his father, younger, smiling faintly, and beside it, a folded paper tucked neatly into the wallet's sleeve. Ethan unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was a rental agreement. The address was Daniel's apartment. His chest constricted, air refused to come easily. Daniel wasn't just some mysterious stranger. He was his father, not in body, but in disguise, in deceit, in betrayal deeper than Ethan could have imagined. Robert had been living a double life, pretending to be someone else, pretending to understand Ethan by becoming the kind of man Ethan might fall for. The room swayed. Ethan dropped the wallet as if it burned him. Everything, every conversation, every message, turned sickeningly false. The affection, the compassion, the warmth that had felt healing now reeked of manipulation that he stumbled to the bathroom sink and splashed water on his face, trying to steady his breathing. The mirror stared back at him, fractured and foreign. How could his father have done this? Was it a test? A punishment? Or worse, an attempt to feel what Ethan felt, to study his son's love from inside the wound itself? By morning, Ethan couldn't bring himself to speak to anyone. His phone lit up with messages from Daniel. "Are you okay? You left something behind, please, don't disappear." He ignored them all. Each word now felt like poison. That evening, he drove to his parents' house without fully deciding why. The drive blurred past him, lights smearing across his windshield, heart pounding against his ribs. When he arrived, Claire opened the door, surprised to see him. Robert wasn't home. He said he had another late meeting, she said softly. Ethan forced a nod, his voice barely holding steady. "Yeah. I figured." He walked through the living room, taking in every detail, the framed photos, the smell of coffee, the piano in the corner. It all looked exactly the same, and yet none of it felt real anymore. When Robert finally came home near midnight, he froze at the sight of Ethan standing by the window. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was no longer invisible, it was alive, pulsing through the air. "I know," Ethan said finally, his voice shaking. "I know who Daniel is." Robert's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Ethan's eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. "Was this your way of understanding me? Pretending to be someone else? Lying to me just to feel control again?" "Ethan, don't," he said sharply. "You don't get to say my name like that." Silence swallowed the room. Claire stirred upstairs, but didn't come down. The truth, heavy and irreparable, hung between them like a storm neither could escape. Ethan turned toward the door, his voice low but steady. "You wanted to understand me, Dad. Congratulations. Now you know what it feels like to be broken by someone you love." He walked out before Robert could respond. The night air hit him like glass, sharp, cold, unforgiving. As he drove away, the road ahead blurred through the shimmer of tears he could no longer hold back. Behind him, the house stood still in the dark, and inside it, a father finally faced the weight of what understanding truly meant, and for the first time, Ethan didn't look back.